12,000 years ago, there was no lake here at all. There was ice, a dying remnant of a glacier that had crawled down out of Canada and was slowly losing its grip on Minnesota. When that ice finally melted, it left a hole in the ground, and the hole filled with water, and the water is still here. Today it is called Beebe Lake, and it sits in the fastest growing county in Minnesota, ringed by farms and new rooftops. This evening we are going to walk its shore, and along the way we will meet glaciers, German settlers, a stone church, and one of the strangest episodes in Minnesota frontier history. We are about 30 miles northwest of Minneapolis, in Wright County, on the western edge of the Twin Cities metro. The park sits on the north shore of Beebe Lake, just outside the city of St. Michael, close to the little river town of Hanover. The Crow River runs nearby, tracing the county line between Wright County and Hennepin County. The lake itself covers 323 acres, a broad sheet of water folded into gently rolling farm country. This is classic central Minnesota, a landscape of small lakes, old fields, and towns that began as church settlements. The park keeps things simple, and that is part of its charm. There is about 1.5 miles of walking trail here, with a paved path that carries you along the water and through the trees. The gates are open from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, and on a September evening like this one, the light comes in low and gold across the water. Behind us are the swimming beach and the picnic grounds. Ahead, the path curls toward the Fishing Pier. It is a small park, but small parks often hold big stories. Beebe Lake spreads across 323 acres, but it is not a deep lake. At its deepest point, the water reaches only about 27 feet. Roughly 42% of the lake, about 135 acres, is what biologists call littoral, meaning shallower than 15 feet. That shallow crown matters because it is where sunlight reaches the bottom and where aquatic plants can grow. In the most recent state survey, plants were found growing down to a depth of 8.5 feet. A shallow, fertile lake like this one behaves very differently from the cold, deep lakes of northern Minnesota, and we will see how in a little while. The story of this water starts with the Des Moines Lobe, the last great tongue of glacial ice to push through this part of the continent. Beginning around 15,000 years ago, it advanced in a series of surges, flowing south through Minnesota and reaching all the way to the site of modern Des Moines, Iowa. By about 12,000 years ago, the ice was gone. It left behind a blanket of pebbly clay, along with sand and gravel dropped by swift meltwater streams. That debris became the soil of these farms, and the dying ice became the lakes. As the glacier wasted away, huge blocks of ice broke off and were buried in the rubble. When those buried blocks finally melted, the ground above them slumped into hollows, and the hollows filled with water. Geologists call this Pothole Country, a gently rolling terrain pocked with wetlands and small lakes. Wright County wears that history on its face. The county spans about 714 square miles, and more than 50 of those square miles are open water, spread across a whole constellation of small lakes. Every one of them, including the lake beside us, is a memory of ice. Beneath the surface of Beebe Lake there is a second landscape, an underwater meadow rooted in the shallows. When state crews surveyed the lake in the summer of 2020, they found plants growing throughout the basin down to 8.5 feet. They recorded 8 kinds of native submersed plants, along with floating leaf and emergent species scattered along the margins. These underwater plants are the working machinery of a shallow lake. They hold the bottom in place, shelter young fish, and feed the waterfowl that drop in on migration. A lake like this is less a pool than a garden. The trail rolls easily past picnic tables and a playground, a sand volleyball court, even horseshoe pits. Wright County runs this place as a county park, though you will see it called a regional park on some maps and signs. It has the feel of a classic Minnesota lake park, built for long summer afternoons. Families claim the shelter, kids work the playground, and anglers drift toward the pier. On a weekday evening in September, though, you can have the path nearly to yourself. That is the season we caught, and it suits the place. The land around this lake was never quite prairie and never quite forest. Wright County is one of just 17 Minnesota counties where savanna soils outweigh both prairie and forest soils. Savanna is the in-between country, open grassland studded with scattered oaks, shaped for thousands of years by fire and drought. To the south and east lay heavier hardwood forest, and to the west the open plains began. Settlers prized this middle ground because it offered timber and water and soil that a plow could actually break. The farms you glimpse beyond the shoreline stand on that old savanna ground. Wright County was established on February 20th, 1855, and it is named for a man who never saw it. Silas Wright was a New York politician, a United States senator, and then governor of New York in the 1840s. He died in 1847, a full 8 years before the county was created, and 2 years before Minnesota was even a territory. Naming frontier counties after famous Eastern statesmen was simply the fashion of the day. The first county seat was Monticello on the Mississippi, before the courthouse moved to Buffalo in 1868, where it remains. The shoreline here alternates between shade and open water views. Cottonwoods and oaks lean over the path, and between them the lake opens wide and silver. Homes and small farms ring the far shore, a reminder that this has been settled country for a long time. But the rhythm of the walk is old-fashioned, just footsteps, water, and wind. September is a generous month for this. The bugs are gone, the light is soft, and the water still remembers summer. The first farm families came into Wright County in the 1850s, and most of them were German and Swedish. They found the savanna openings and the lake margins and set to work turning them into fields. The growth was fast. In 1860, the county held about 3,700 people, and just 15 years later it counted nearly 14,000. Whole neighborhoods of the old country reassembled themselves here, and you can still read their names on the map, in towns like St. Michael, Hanover, and Albertville. St. Michael began not as a town but as a parish. In 1856, German Catholic immigrants settled along the Crow River and raised a small log church, and they named it for the Archangel Michael. The early ministers came from St. John's Abbey in Collegeville, the great Benedictine monastery to the northwest. A post office opened under the name St. Michael in 1858. The church came first, and everything else, the store, the mill, the town itself, gathered around it. It is a pattern repeated across central Minnesota, where the steeple was the seed of the city. Think about that as the path bends along the water. Nearly every town in this corner of the state began as somebody's act of faith, a congregation before it was a community. The people who worshipped in that log church cleared the fields that became these farms, and their descendants are still here. The town did not take its name from a founder or a railroad executive. It took its name from its church. That tells you most of what you need to know about how this landscape was settled. The log church was replaced in 1866 by a larger building in the center of town, which served the parish for about 25 years. Then in 1890, the congregation raised something remarkable, a Gothic revival church that was the largest church in all of Wright County at the time. Inside it was finished with ornate statuary and German wood carvings, the craft traditions of the old country translated into a Minnesota prairie town. In 1979, the building was added to the National Register of Historic Places, honored as the religious and social center of a German Catholic community. It still stands today, and Mass is still said beneath its vaults. The Crow River is the quiet organizing line of this whole neighborhood. It flows along the eastern edge of St. Michael, separating the city from Rogers and marking the boundary with Hennepin County, before emptying into the Mississippi. The first settlers built their log church beside it, and the mill towns of the area grew up at its crossings. St. Michael itself incorporated as a village on February 22, 1890, the same year its great church rose. Today, the city spreads across more than 36 square miles between the river and the lakes. The river is modest, but in a landscape without mountains, rivers do the map making. There is a particular pleasure in a flat, easy trail like this one. Nothing demands your attention, so your attention wanders to better things: the pattern of light on the water, a heron stalking the shallows, the far-off hum of a farm tractor. A walk here is measured in conversations rather than elevation gain. The path is paved and smooth, friendly to strollers and slow walkers alike. It is the kind of trail you bring your grandmother to. Minnesota does these modest lake parks very well, and this is a fine example of the breed. Just south of the lake sits Hanover, a river town founded in 1877 and named for Hanover in Germany, the homeland of some of its first settlers. The Crow River runs right through its downtown, and spanning it is the town treasure, the Hanover Bridge of 1885, now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. For generations, it carried wagons and then cars between two counties, one bank in Wright and the other in Hennepin. And here is a strange footnote for a small town. Bob Dylan, Minnesota's most famous songwriter, once owned a ranch near Hanover on the Hennepin County side. This peaceful county was once declared to be in a state of insurrection. In 1858, a settler named Henry Wallace was found dead, and a neighbor, Oscar Jackson, was tried for the murder and acquitted in April of 1859. Days later, a mob, still convinced of his guilt, seized Jackson and hanged him. Governor Henry Sibley called it a high-handed outrage, and when local authorities refused to act, he declared Wright County in a state of insurrection and sent in militia units and 35 special police officers to restore order. The accused mob leaders went free after a hung jury, and the original murder was never solved. The whole affair went down in history as the Wright County War, a war in which the state's only enemy was a mob. It is hard to square that story with the scene in front of us. The same townships that once hosted militia camps are now a checkerboard of cornfields and cul-de-sacs, and the loudest thing on this trail is a red-winged blackbird. But frontier Minnesota was a rough, improvised place, where courts were new and trust in them was newer. The Wright County War became a cautionary tale told across the young state. Order won, eventually. The county that once defied a governor now mostly worries about school budgets and road projects. Beebe Lake is what scientists call a eutrophic lake, meaning rich, fertile, well-fed water. Its trophic state index sits around 58, which is a common condition for shallow lakes in farm country. Fertile water grows green in high summer, thick with algae and plant life, and clarity here runs below the average for its watershed. But there is an encouraging detail buried in the monitoring data. Between 1976 and 2019, more than 4 decades of measurements, the water clarity of Beebe Lake showed no real change. In a hard-working agricultural landscape, holding steady for 40 years is quietly impressive. Two uninvited guests complicate life here: curly-leaf pondweed and Eurasian watermilfoil. Both are invasive aquatic plants that can crowd out the native underwater meadows if left alone. The people who live around the lake have not left them alone. The Beebe Lake Improvement Association has organized treatments year after year, targeting curly-leaf pondweed since at least 2010 and watermilfoil since 2016. Some years the permits covered more than 100 acres, and in 2020 the crews treated about 14 acres of pondweed and nearly 4 of milfoil. It is unglamorous, persistent work, the aquatic version of weeding a garden that never stays weeded. The fishing pier reaches out from the shore near the picnic grounds, and it is the social center of the park on a warm evening. Piers like this one are small acts of generosity. You do not need a boat, a trailer, or a single dollar of gear beyond a rod and a bucket. Kids catch their first fish off structures like this all across Minnesota. The railing wears the scuff marks of 1,000 tackle boxes. If the water is calm, you can watch bluegills hanging in the shadows below the deck. Anglers work this lake for largemouth bass, bluegill, and black crappie, the classic cast of a shallow, weedy Minnesota lake. The underwater plant beds that the Lake Association labors to keep balanced are exactly what shelters these fish. Bass hunt the weed edges, and the panfish school around any structure they can find. For boaters, the state maintains a public access with a concrete ramp on the lake, sized for boats up to about 18 feet. Nothing here is trophy water, and that is not the point. This is an everyday lake, the kind that teaches patience to 8-year-olds. From May through September, a caretaker is on duty here, and it shows in the mowed grass and the tidy shelter. The restrooms and buildings run through the warm season, and the county rents the shelter out for reunions and graduation parties. There is even a group camp, reserved by phone and set aside for nonprofit groups. Dogs are welcome on the trail on a leash, though the beach and picnic grounds are off limits to them. It is all very orderly, very Minnesotan. Somebody clearly loves this place, and it repays the attention. So who was Beebe? The honest answer is that the record has gone thin. The lake is recorded as being named for an early settler, one of the first comers of the 1850s whose name attached itself to the water and then outlived every other trace of him. Minnesota is covered with lakes like this, carrying the surnames of pioneers whose stories have quietly dissolved into the townships they founded. The name endures, spoken every day by people who never wonder about it. That is its own kind of monument, modest and durable, like the country itself. By late afternoon, the light starts performing. September sun comes in low across the lake and turns the water to hammered metal. The cottonwoods have just begun to think about yellow, and the shoreline grass has gone the color of ripe wheat. Summer crowds are back in school and the park exhales. This is arguably the finest month for walking in Minnesota, past the heat, before the frost. If you only visit this park once, visit it in September, an hour before sunset. Now consider what has happened around this quiet water. In 1900, St. Michael was a farm village of 305 people. By 1990, it held about 5,400, and by 2020 more than 18,000, with the count still climbing. Wright County as a whole passed 141,000 residents and now ranks as the 10th largest county in Minnesota and the fastest growing. The metro is arriving, subdivision by subdivision, across the old Savanna. A century ago, this park would have seemed unnecessary, just another stretch of lakeshore in an empty county, but today it is becoming precious. Walk here and you can feel the two eras overlapping. Inside the tree line, it is 1890, water and oaks and blackbird song. Beyond it, rooftops and commuter roads press closer every year. This is why counties buy lakeshore and hold it open, not for the county that exists today, but for the one that is coming. The families moving into St. Michael by the thousands will need somewhere to teach a kid to fish. A morning will come when this modest park is the oldest unchanged thing for miles. There is one more reason these pothole lakes matter, and it has feathers. The wetlands and small lakes left by the glaciers across this region form some of the most important waterfowl breeding country on the continent. Mallards, teal, Wood ducks and divers nest and stage across these basins, and in spring and fall the sky over water like this fills with wings. A shallow, weedy lake that frustrates a swimmer is a banquet hall for a duck. The plants, the invertebrates, the muddy margins, all of it is food and cover. Beebe Lake is one small room in a vast flyway hotel that stretches from Iowa to the Canadian prairies. One small county park, and look what it held. A glacier and its buried ice, a savanna between forest and prairie, German farmers, and a log church that grew into the largest church in the county. A governor who sent the militia against a mob, a historic bridge, a lake association pulling weeds by the acre, and a flyway full of ducks. You do not need mountains to find a story. You need a place that has been paying attention for 12,000 years. Beebe Lake has been doing exactly that. All you have to do is walk slowly and listen. The light is nearly gone now, and the lake has settled into evening stillness. If you find yourself northwest of the Twin Cities with an hour to spare, this little park outside St. Michael will treat you well. Bring a rod, bring a dog on a leash, bring nobody at all. Some of the best places are the modest ones that ask nothing of you but your attention. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.